Talk boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from International Boxing News. Vacant IBF welterweight title for Jonas.
What?
Unified super welterweight champion Natasha Jonas will clash with Kendi Wyatt for the vacant IBF welterweight title on the undercard of Cruz Dezern versus Marshall. It appears that Natasha Jonas is moving down in weight for her next fight, and I think that may herald the end of her junior middleweight campaign, and in effect, it's the nail in the coffin for a potential Terry Harper undisputed junior middleweight title fight. That's another nail in the coffin for what could have been the Clarissa Shields fight. Clarissa said she'd be willing to move down for Natasha. She can make 154, but not 147, and if it is Natasha Jonas's intention to finish out her career in the women's welterweight division, that kills a Shields fight. But it does afford Natasha the chance to become a two-division champion. Opposite the ring, Kendi Wyatt sports a professional record of 11 wins with 4 losses, no draws, 3 knockouts, having been knocked out 2 times. 2 times in 15 professional contests, 15 professional bouts. If Natasha Jonas is successful, she will become one of 3 champions in the women's welterweight division. In truth, I wasn't even aware that the IBF title was up for grabs. I didn't know it was vacant. I thought it would be on the line in the upcoming McCaskill versus Ryan fight, which is still being negotiated. Natasha wins, she becomes one of 3 champions at that weight. Do you get the sense that she's eyeing the winner of McCaskill versus Ryan, or is she just doing her own thing the way she always does her own thing? Sporting a professional record of 13 wins with 2 losses, 1 draw, 8 knockouts, having been knocked out once, just once, in 16 professional bouts. Natasha Jonas is an accomplished fighter, the Unified Ring Magazine and lineal junior middleweight champion. If you would have told me after the Vivian Obanov fight that Natasha Jonas would one day become a junior middleweight champion, all the way up there at junior middleweight when she herself used to campaign as a super featherweight, I figured Natasha Jonas would rebound off that loss to Vivian, and I figured that one day she could see herself becoming a champion, but I didn't figure it would be all the way up there at 154 pounds. That was the curveball, and she's had quite the run up there, taking on unbeaten Patricia Bergoult for the WBC, Marie E.D. Care for the IBF. She managed to pick up the vacant WBO opposite the ring former champion Chris Namis. She's accomplished. She's done a lot, though I've no doubts the boo birds and the critics are going to levy even more criticism towards her for leaving the junior middleweight division on the cusp of what could have been the undisputed title fight between her and her old buddy, Terry Harper. She's been subject to criticism for that because the Harper people, they're willing to entertain the fight. They're more than willing, but Natasha is simply not receptive. She's addressed the fight many times already. She couldn't care less what the boo birds and the critics have to say, though if somebody told me that she's at fault for not crowning an undisputed champion at junior middleweight, I'd be hard-pressed. I mean, I can't disagree. Can't say they're wrong. There was interest in a second fight. There was interest, palpable interest, in a rematch between her and Terry, and for personal reasons, Natasha Jonas chose to forego it. She will instead be facing Kendi Wyatt, who's coming off a split decision win over Kirsty Bavington. 3 for 3 in her last 6. She won 3 fights, she lost 3 fights. She got stopped by Jessica McCaskill, decision by Alma Ibarra and Kaylee Reese. She's coming off a win, a split decision win over Kirsty Bavington. I like Natasha Jonas's chances against this fighter. She's got the ceiling, she's got the talent, and the welterweight division, I think, is a more accommodating division for Natasha Jonas, who was never a true junior middleweight. She was talented enough and sharp enough to win a couple of belts up there, but she's not a bona fide junior middleweight. Not a true junior middleweight. The size and durability of a true junior middleweight was evident in the Marie-Eve Dicaire fight. Marie-Eve Dicaire, who was uncharacteristically aggressive with Natasha Jonas in that fight more often than not. Marie is a defensively minded fighter that moves lateral and shifts her weight onto her back foot, fends off opponents. With Natasha, she got aggressive, likely because Natasha is not a true junior middle. Marie tried to bully her. Natasha won the fight, but you could see that the fight was physically taxing on Natasha Jonas because she's naturally smaller. Welterweight will be a more accommodating for her. Kendi Wyatt, this is a fighter that got stopped some years ago by Christina Linardatu. In more recent years, she was stopped by Jessica McCaskill. Natasha has always been a very big puncher.
Spiteful southpaw.
I think if she hits the gas and pours it on, she packs a big enough punch that she too could stop Kendi Wyatt. I like her chances to become a 2-division champion and make that history.
She's likely going to keep getting criticized for foregoing the Terry Harper fight. That's just the truth of it.
Men's super lightweight news on the heels of his latest big win. Lopez versus Taylor peaked at approximately 980,000 viewers on ESPN. Biggest boxing audience on US TV in 2023.
I figured this fight would do good numbers.
For Top Rank, for ESPN, this was one of those fights that really is value for money. This caliber of a fight with these two kinds of fighters, the intrigue associated with it, and that it wasn't a pay-per-view.
Value for money.
Nielsen Media Research revealed figures on Tuesday that indicated ESPN's viewership for Lopez versus Taylor peaked at approximately 980,000 on Saturday night from the Hulu Theater at Madison Square Garden in New York. Their 12-round, 140-pound championship match, which Lopez won by unanimous decision, was watched by an average audience of 945,000. ESPN's two-bout broadcast, which lasted 2 hours and 23 minutes, drew an average viewership of 781,000. It began with unbeaten junior middleweight Xander Zayas' 8-round unanimous decision win over Ronald Cruz.
In an ideal world, boxing would be as accessible as possible to the common man because it's the common man's sport.
You don't want a bunch of fights happening behind a paywall because not everybody's going to pay to play. Not everybody's going to pay to see it. And when a lot of people aren't paying to see it,
They aren't watching it.
they aren't talking about it at the water cooler on Monday morning. Nielsen's viewership numbers include only those who watched Lopez versus Taylor on linear television because Nielsen doesn't track streaming audiences. ESPN also doesn't disclose how many viewers watch programming on ESPN Plus, the network's $9.99 per month streaming service.
Because of this, I'd put the number of people that actually saw this fight well over 1 million.
It's got to be well over 1 million people that saw this thing because I myself watched it on the app. I watched it on ESPN Plus, and if you're telling me that close to 1 million people saw it on regular ESPN, tack on a few 100,000 on the app.
That's in excess of 1 million.
Which is good for the platform, it's good for ESPN, and it's good for Top Rank. You want to show your broadcast partners that your programming, your content draws eyes and drives subscriptions.
Which thereby may incentivize your broadcast partner to continue to invest in the sport of boxing. Ideally, that's how things would work. But because of the fighters and their teams
Right.
and their financial demands, what they want for a fight,
Sticking fights on pay-per-view becomes a necessary evil. Otherwise, if you can't satisfy the fighter's financial demands, you ain't got no fight.
I think that pertains more to the PBC as an outfit than Top Rank because nobody else in the American market is staging more pay-per-views than the PBC. Top Rank are a little bit more reserved.
Regularly exercising a bit more discretion when asking the fight fans to go into their wallets, into their pockets in order to see a fight. This fight really was value for money, and people tuned in.
But on the heels of yet another big win in his young career, Lopez's ego is once again getting the best of him. He is asking for a deal in excess of 9 figures. What are you talking about? The low end of $100 million?
Isn't that Top Rank's annual budget? Hell, I think that's a little more than their annual budget. The annual budget they are allotted by the ESPN platform. You want them to give you a deal worth 9 figures.
I think that's what Top Rank spends in a year to stage all these fights, and you want them to give that to you.
Gotta be exaggerating. His ego is once again getting the best of him, calling himself a 2-time undisputed champion.
Some people have been egging him on. Derek James.
Earlier today at the kickoff press conference for Crawford versus Spence, Terrence Crawford emphasized he has a chance to be the first male boxer to win 4-belt undisputed at 2 weights, to which Derek James tried to correct him, insisting that Teofimo Lopez already did that last weekend.
No, he didn't.
There were not 4 belts. There were not 4 alphabet titles on the line Saturday night. There was but one, just one, the WBO title and the Ring Magazine belt.
That's it.
Veteran boxing scribe Jake Donovan face-palmed in his tweet, to which Teofimo Lopez replied, "Don't be that kind of groupie, Jake Donovan. How can someone call themselves real when expressing false information? Derek James is correct. I am the first male to do it. Ha ha ha. Errol Spence, this is why I am content.
Is he trolling?
He's gotta be, because becoming an undisputed champion is a very specific accomplishment that entails specific things. You have to be in possession of all the alphabet titles, all 4 belts at your weight. And Teofimo Lopez isn't.
Rolly Romero's got the WBA.
Regis Prograis got the WBC. Subriel Matias, he has the IBF.
Are we really in a place where this needs to be explained? Do you need to hold people's hands for them to understand that while Teofimo Lopez beat the man to be the man, he's not undisputed?
So maybe you're one of these guys that don't place no emphasis on alphabet titles. You don't actually like the alphabet organizations. If that's the case, then why do you want this fighter to be thought of as an undisputed champion?
He doesn't have all the belts.
Maybe you're one of these guys, you don't think a guy should have to collect all the belts. So long as he's lineal and Ring Magazine champion, perhaps that's enough for you. And that is what Teofimo Lopez is.
He's a 2-time lineal, 2-time Ring Magazine, current reigning WBO champion.
Which is pretty fucking good for a guy who's only 25 years old. A 25-year-old 2-division champion. I'm not slighting Teofimo Lopez's resume. I'm just giving it to you straight.
Yeah.
Because it's the only way I know how to give it to you.
He is not undisputed.
And he never was. Because Vasyl Lomachenko was never undisputed and he beat him.
So how the fuck was Lopez undisputed? Here today at super lightweight, how the fuck is Lopez undisputed?
He isn't. People are just childish, the ones going along with this. Mental midgets that are slaves to the moment and live in it irrespective of how illogical that might be. That there literally are 3 other champions at this weight and Teofimo hasn't fought them.
So how the fuck is he undisputed?
He's not undisputed, that's the point. No matter how many times people egg him on and repeat his sentiments, he's not actually an undisputed champion. Just in keeping with the theme of all things super lightweight, newly crowned WBA champion Rolly Romero posted this to his Instagram stories, a caption that reads, #Romero versus Garcia 2023, a palpable fight.
Rolly wants to do it. Ryan wants to do it.
These 2 kids are too JV for a fighter, like a Regis Prograis, a killer, like a Subriel Matias. For them, the ends wouldn't justify the means, even if they are champions. The last we heard from O'Hara Davies, the mandatory challenger to Rolly Romero's WBA title, O'Hara said, Rolly is free to fight Ryan Garcia. I have nothing against it. I actually want to see that fight. In the meantime, I will fight whoever is next in line for the world title. I am mandatory for the WBA. The fight got ordered.
The fight between Rolly, the champion, and O'Hara, the challenger.
Though given the scare that Rolly Romero suffered at the hands of a 40-year-old Ishmael Barroso, do you think they're in a hurry to put him in the ring with just anybody?
He almost lost to a 40-year-old nondescript Venezuelan fighter.
Rolly wants Ryan, and Ryan wants Rolly. To that, O'Hara Davies continued, of course they can fight, just won't be for a title, as Rolly would have been stripped for not fighting against me.
You see, this is why I feel that Subriel needs to take care of business against Francis Bartholomew and then do what he's got to do to get off the island, because he's not going to get a fight with Rolly.
Rolly's mandatory challenger, O'Hara Davies, he'd be lucky to get a fight with Rolly.
O'Hara, who said, don't get my words mixed up, as I said, Rolly and Ryan Garcia can fight. Yes, of course, but it won't be for a title, and Rolly will get stripped for not fighting against his mandatory. Me.
O'Hara Davies is entrusting the WBA to follow through to do their job. That if Rolly doesn't fight him in his very next fight, they're going to take the belt from him and give it to O'Hara. That's what O'Hara thinks is going to happen.
And maybe it will.
Or maybe it won't. Maybe Gilberto Mendoza and the Championships Committee over there at the WBA might see the financial value in a Romero versus Ryan Garcia fight and decide maybe O'Hara Davies' title shot isn't all that important.
Maybe.
You tell yourself, but they've already ordered the fight. They've already ordered the fight between O'Hara Davies and Rolly Romero, and need I remind you that the WBC already ordered the fight between Keith Thurman and Errol Spence, but when push came to shove, they doubled back and they decided to let a bigger fight happen. The same could apply here.
How much money does O'Hara Davies stand to make boxing Rolly Romero anyway? It's not like Rolly Romero is handing out life-altering purses and life-altering paydays to people that fight him. He certainly didn't change Ishmael Barroso's life.
O'Hara Davies likely only stands to make $100,000 if he's lucky, boxing Rolly Romero for that WBA title. Maybe $100,000, maybe just north of that, but nothing significant.
They can pay him to step aside. When you think about the commercial value of Romero versus Garcia,
the amount of money that fight could generate, getting O'Hara Davies to step aside is a worthwhile investment. Maybe you pay him what he would have made in a Rolly Romero fight, maybe 100,000, maybe 2, maybe even 3, because you stand to make much, much more than that making this fight.
Romero versus Garcia.
Romero versus Garcia can be billed as a box office fight, a pay-per-view, but Romero versus Davies...
That's not box office worthy.
Being honest with you, that's an undercard fight.
Yeah.
May seem that O'Hara Davies is being particularly stubborn, that he wants his title shot. He wants that WBA title, but for all we know, that might be a money play. He's being stubborn deliberately so he can extract funds.
He knows he ain't gonna make no life-altering purse boxing Rolly Romero, and even if he wins the title...
That still doesn't guarantee that he's gonna make life-altering money being WBA champion at super lightweight. Do you think that Subriel Matias is making life-altering money being IBF champion?
What do you think they're paying that guy to box Francis Bartholomew?
O'Hara Davies' characteristic stubbornness could be a money play to get the most bang for his buck to step aside. Maybe he's being stubborn on purpose, so they have to pay him handsomely to play ball.
Maybe.
I don't think the biggest issue this potential fight faces is getting O'Hara Davies to step aside. I think that he can be convinced. The biggest issue I see is what network airs the fight. On what platform does it take place? Because in spite of Rolly being the WBA champion, that doesn't make him a bigger draw than Ryan Garcia.
You see the numbers for Davis versus Romero, and then you see the numbers for Davis versus Garcia, and there is a glaring disparity.
What's the expectation? That Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy Promotions are going to truck Ryan Garcia off again to Showtime? Is that what they're expecting?
Rolly's not Gervonta Davis, you know. They might have did that with Gervonta Davis, but Rolly ain't Gervonta.
Rolly can't play A-side to Ryan Garcia, even with that WBA title. Your commercial value is your commercial value.
That's the biggest hindrance this fight has. What platform is going to air it? Who's going to helm the promotion?
Golden Boy Promotions was willing to send Ryan Garcia over to Showtime for a very big fight. Are the people at Mayweather Promotions and Showtime willing to do the same? Would they allow Rolly to go to DAZN?
No.
Or will their negotiations...
What negotiations?
Ryan Garcia had a bit of a quarrel, a lover's spat, with his promoter Oscar De La Hoya quite publicly some days ago. I think if Ryan could, he'd leave Golden Boy and cross over to PBC, though I'm not sure he's at liberty to do that.
Not contractually.
That if he could, he would go to the PBC to box the likes of Rolly Romero and Isaac Cruz and maybe Gervonta Davis in a rematch.
If he could.
But he's still with Golden Boy. To my knowledge, he is, as Golden Boy Promotions' contract isn't up. So platforms and promotion are an issue.
They still are.